Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this afternoon session. So we're looking at clearing records, part 3 in the webinars that we've been running recently. So we've also looked at clearing audit trail, clearing customer supplies and nominal records, and also we've picked up on clearing stock records as well. So part 3, we're looking at this today, clearing records in the form of invoices, orders, and quotations from the various lists that you have. Now, just before we get started, as usual, a little bit of housekeeping. So you don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you've got one and you've enabled it, you'll just find it should appear in sort of like an orangey red color with a cross through it, meaning that you're muted. You find you can't unmute yourself. You don't need a mic for these sessions. Now, you'll still be able to ask questions. It's just you need to type them into the questions panel, which you should see in the bottom right-hand corner. If you can't currently see that, just click your little icon on your toolbar, the one that looks like the speech bubble containing the question mark. It should expand the panel down the right-hand side and you'll be able to start typing in the box. So any questions or comments you have for us along the way, just pop them in there, click send, and either myself, I'm going to try and interact with that quite a bit today, or one of my colleagues will pick that up. So today we're joined by Abby, Jackie, and Tina, who will be on hand to answer any questions that you might have. So they'll either type in an answer or maybe provide you with a link to one of our help center articles, which will point you in the right direction. Or maybe if it's very specific, your query, they'll point you in the direction to get in touch with our support team. But anything and everything, just pop it in there. There is an option to download a handout today as well, which is essentially a copy of today's slides. I know some of you like to do that, so you have an icon for that one as well. 2 versions of the handout available today. One has got all the color on, etc., and the other one is a print friendly. I know some of you like to print them out and make notes, etc. So if you want to go down that route, maybe go for the print friendly edition. They will be available to you afterwards as well. So what we tend to do now is include a link to a Sage City post, which will include a link to the recording, the common questions and answers from today's session, and also links so you can download the handouts if you forget or you lose them. Right, okay, let's get started. Let's have a look at what we're going to be covering. So a little bit of background as to why we clear records. What's the advantages, and also what's the downside of that as well. So obviously there are 2 sides to that story. We're going to look at run through a series of demonstrations as well. So I'm going to quickly cover backing up, creating an archive. So I'll touch on that one. We always get loads of questions about archiving, but I'll try and explain that and give you a quick demo. And then we'll get on to the main part of the demonstration today, which is what we want to look at. So we're going to look at deleting invoices from the invoice list, how we go about doing that, some quick tips to help you do that a little bit quicker as well. We're going to run through deleting orders. Now, orders or sales orders and purchase orders, that option is only available to you if you are on the professional level of the software. So probably not applicable to everyone on the session today. But again, I think if you can delete invoices, it's pretty much the same for orders, whether it's in sales orders or purchase orders. But we want to explain a little bit behind the scenes as to what's happening as well when you're deleting that. So with regard to allocations and the on order status as well, but really straightforward. I'm going to finish the session demo wise by having a quick look at quotations. Again, pretty much the same with a slight twist on that one. And then we'll look at compressing your data as well. So if you do delete any records, whether that's transactions, customers, suppliers, nominals, etc., or what we're covering today, it's advisable to compress your data afterwards. So we'll touch on that as well. As usual, there's loads of information available in the Help Center, so if you want detailed steps, I have included some links on the handout as well, and you'll see them as green buttons on the various slides as I run through the session today. So again, if you have downloaded, it just makes it a little bit easier for you to get to. But really simple to find that information anyway. As normal, we'll just end the session by explaining a little bit more about the additional support. We've got this session scheduled in for 45 minutes. I think it'll be a little bit quicker than that because it's really straightforward what we're covering. Right, let's get stuck in then. So why do we clear records? So what's the downs or what's the benefits and also the negatives of that as well? So the pros and cons. So we clear records, basically. Advantages is going to help to ensure that your software runs more efficiently. Obviously, the less data you have, the easier it is for your software to handle. So things like backups will be smaller because it's less to back up. Check data will be a little bit quicker, and just general processing and reporting within the software may be a bit quicker as well. Now I say it may be a bit quicker because it might not be. Just deleting some records, you might not see a significant change. It might just be, it's probably over the years as you've started entering data, it's probably slowed down a little bit, but just gradually, and you've probably not noticed it. So stripping out records, whatever that is, whether it's, again, customers, nominals, transactions, or invoices, etc., you may not notice a big difference. Now, one thing to note is, and I've got it on the slide there, is clearing records is an optional task. And I'm going to tell you why in a moment that it's an optional task. It's not something that you have to do. You're not forced to clear your records. Now, the downside of removing records is that it removes information from your live company. So you've got to have a bit of think about how far back do you need your live data to go. So will you always need immediate access to an invoice from 3 years ago, 4 years ago? How far back do you need to go? And what about compliance? Well, it's not actually essential to store all your records in your live company. If you've got a backup or an archive, it means you've got copies of that information, which you can always refer back to if you needed to. An archive is a little bit quicker, which we'll have a look at in a few minutes. So by having a backup or an archive or both, it means that you can always refer back to that. So it means that you can remove information from your live company. So you don't necessarily need, 6, 7, 10 years plus worth of records and transactions within your live company. But again, removing it will mean that it's gone. So the only way they're then going to be referred to that, able to sort of get back to that information, is by restoring a backup or popping into an archive where you've got that data stored. We'll come on to backups and archives in a few minutes. Now, when I mentioned that it's not compulsory to clear your data, there are some recommended data levels, and this was information that was published along with the release of version 28.1. So in 28.1, if you did attend that webinar, maybe you're up to speed on some of the features, we introduced a data management tool. Now, the data management tool sort of kicks into effect on 28.1 when your data reaches 80% of the recommendation. So for transactions, we recommend a maximum of 250,000 transactions. So when it reaches 200,000, you would start getting warnings, the data management tool would appear, etc. For invoices, we're looking at a recommendation of 50,000. But these are just recommendations. They aren't limits to the software. There's actually no limit to the number of transactions that you can enter, or the number of invoices, or the number of customer records. I've seen, certainly over the years, I've seen a lot more than the recommended levels. But they are recommendations. If you need to find out how many you've got in a specific area, particularly for invoices or orders, then just go into help and about within your software. Then in the middle column, there is an option, invoices and orders, and it will tell you the number of records that you've got in those areas. So for what we're covering today, it will be 40,000 is 80% of the recommendation in the specific areas. If you want more information about the sort of the recommended data levels, you will find it within the Help Center. So again, if you've downloaded the handouts, that information is available via that green button there. But again, easy enough to find just by doing a search of the Help Center. Right, let's get stuck into some demonstrations, and hopefully you'll pick up some tips along the way. Nice and easy to remove records from these areas, but as I say, I'm going to give you a few tips just to help you make that process just that little bit more efficient. So we're going to look at a series of demonstrations, nice and straightforward, these ones. We're going to start with backing up and creating an archive. Now, we do have, or we will be running sessions in March and beyond on archives. We get loads of questions on an archive, and I'm going to attempt again to try and explain what an archive is and how you use that, what it does do, what it doesn't do. So we'll run through these demonstrations now. And I'll be using version 29 in today's session. So just in case you're wondering, yours may look a little bit different to mine. I'll explain about version 29 when I start sharing as well. Anyway, preparation. So before you go deleting any records and removing information, we always recommend that you back up your data. So before any big change, so if you're running a month end or running a year end or clearing your audit trail or anything of that nature, we would always recommend that you back up your data. And I'm sure everyone is familiar with that, so I'm not going to run through the process of taking a backup. It's something that you should be doing probably on a daily basis anyway. The one that you may not be familiar with, though, is the option of taking an archive. Now, this option has been around for many, many years, and you may have loads of archives and you weren't even aware of it. Generally, you would associate taking an archive as part of the year-end process. But you can take an archive at any time. So if you have just archived your data as part of the year-end and then you're about to clear records, if you haven't entered any more records into these areas, then you don't necessarily need to create another one. Now, an archive, and I'll show you this in just a moment, is basically a copy of your exact data as at the point when the archive is taken. Now, that's literally, it's all of your data as at that point in time, and it is a copy of that information. So if you've got 10,000 transactions, you might have, let's say, 700 invoices, X number of customers, all of that information is copied into the archive company. So it's a snapshot of your data at that point in time. Now, it is a read-only set of that data. So the idea is it's almost like accessing a separate company, but it's actually a snapshot of that company at that point in time when the archive was taken. So you can access it alongside your live data. So it's almost like accessing a separate company, but essentially it will have almost the same information. So it is separate. Now, nothing then changes in that archive as you go and continue to enter additional transactions in your live data. It wouldn't add anything or remove anything in your archive. Your archive is that snapshot at that point in time. So it's used for reference purposes, reporting purposes as well. So if, for instance, in my live company, let's say I've got 700 invoices and I remove the first 200 because they're quite old and I don't need them anymore, they would still be included in the archive that I took at the time, but they're no longer in my live company. That means that I need to refer back to that information. I could just pop into the archive and see that information. But because I've deleted it from my live company, I can't see it in that one itself. So I've got to switch back. Now, the advantages of an archive over a backup is that to view the information in a backup, you've got to restore that. Now, there's a process to that where you would back up your current data, you would restore your backup, get whatever information you want, and then restore back to your current live data. Whereas an archive, you're just switching essentially data sets. So you're not messing around with backing up or restoring. And archiving as well, just to try and spell this one out as well, it does not remove any data from your live company. So at a year end or even partway through your year when you create an archive, it doesn't strip any information out. It just copies that data as it stands. Now I'm going to quickly show you how to take an archive. So I'll quickly share my screen. Spend a couple of minutes looking at archive. And to create an archive, all we would do is we go into Tools, Period End, and then you have an option Archive Company. So I click the option, it just tells me it's going to close any other windows that I've got open. So I click yes to continue. Gives me a path to the archive. I can't change that one, just accept what it is. It gives me a description. Now it says mid-year 2022. 2022 refers to the financial year I'm in. Mid-year just means I'm not doing it as part of the year end. If you want to rename that description, you might put something like pre-delete invoices, something along those lines, whatever you want. You can change it if required, but I'll just accept the defaults. Same for the archive folder. I'll just accept all of that. I'll click OK. It tells me the archive process is being completed, so I just click OK, and that's it done. Now yours, obviously with a big set of data, may take a bit longer than mine. Mine's quite almost a tiny set of data. I've only got 1,200 transactions on this one, so next to nothing. Now, I'm in my live company at this stage. So if I go and enter a new invoice, I just continue as normal. I'll just quickly pop one on. I will save it. So as we can see, I'm now up to, if I go down to the bottom, I'm up to invoice number 93. Now, if I switch to an archive, so let's say I want to go back and for whatever reason that I want to view some older information, that older information is still in my live company at the moment because I haven't removed anything that's any different. But if I want to switch to an archive, I just go to File, Open Company Archive, and it will list any archives that you've got. So it's just a case of you choosing which set of archive data you want to get back to. And again, because this option's been around for quite a few years now, and I say quite a few years, I think it was about version 9 it was introduced, the archive option. So we're up to just approaching version 29 now, which is what I'm using today in the background there. So around about 20 years it's been available, the archive option. So I just select that archive, click open, and it's then going to prompt me to log in. So I just log in. And I'm in my archive company at that stage. Now, the only reason I really know just by looking at that is it tells me at the top I'm in an archive. So right on the title bar at the top, I'm in the archive company. That means that if I go into the likes of invoices, I can see, well, I'm up to, in this case, it's quotation number 92. So my date, as I say, that's just a snapshot at that point in time. So if I did need to refer to, let's say my live company, I'm going to get rid of some of these invoices. They're still in my archive company, so I can get back to them for reference purposes. I hope that makes sense. That's all I really want to cover on archive. We're all going to go into it in a bit more detail in our sessions that we've got planned in, or we're hoping to plan in for March. If you need more information about them, in the meantime, get into the Help Center. Or if I just pop back to the slides for a moment. So there is a YouTube channel as well. So search over YouTube channel, we've got a couple of those. And there is a company archives video on there as well. So again, if you've downloaded the handout, that link will work. It'll take you across to the YouTube video. So use that as well to find out more about it. Right, okay, let's get cracking then with actually clearing records. Again, if you think of any questions along the way, just pop it in and we'll try our best to answer as many as we can. So deleting invoices. Now, records must be deleted manually. Just by running year end, which a lot of people think by running year end, it's then going to strip out all their information. It doesn't. Year end doesn't remove any information. It pulls some transactions, it clears down balances, etc. But it doesn't remove any information. It doesn't delete transactions. It doesn't delete all their invoices from your invoices list or orders or quotations, which is why we're covering these in today's session. So if you are going to delete records, you've got to do it manually. So it's a separate process away from the year end. So it's just a case of selecting your invoices and using the delete option on your toolbar at the top. We'll see that in a moment. So it is nice and simple. Now, using a filter will help you select the records to be deleted. So you might apply a filter and say, right, I only want to see invoices prior to a certain date or prior to a certain invoice number. And because you've only got the ones then listed that you want to get rid of, it means you can then just use the swap and delete options at that point to quickly select them and then delete them. Now, because we go back to the recommendations that we mentioned earlier, where the maximum number of invoices was 50,000, you might just think, well, actually, I'm nowhere near that. I don't want to get rid of information. What I'll do is I'll just apply a filter to maybe hide records. So you're still almost like removing them from the screens, but they're still there in the background. They're still in your live company. So we'll have a look at that, but that aspect of it as well. I don't want to encourage you to go down the route of removing information. If you don't need to, if you're unsure, don't. So we'll have a look at that aspect of it as well. Now, one thing I'll need to mention, I'll try and demonstrate this one as well, is that deleting a record from within invoices and credits, it does not remove the related transaction from the customer activity or just any stock. It just literally removes that record from the invoices and credits list. Right, okay, let's have a look at that process. So back to my screen, I'm still in my archive at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it back across to my live company. So we'll just into File, Open, and then Open Company Data. And that's me back into my, well, once I log in anyway, that's me back into my live company at that point. So it doesn't mention archive at the top. If I pop into the likes of invoices and credits, I can see I've got number 93. I'm back to that one again. It's now listed. So this is my live company that I'm in. So let's just take an example. So let's say this invoice number 1, I wanted to get rid of that one. We'll show you how you can delete them in bulk as well using filters, etc. in a moment. So basics of deleting an invoice or a credit note from the list is you select it, so it's highlighted, and then you click delete. So it's just asking me to confirm, do you want to delete all of the selected invoices? So if I click yes, it removes it. Simple as. If I want to highlight more than one, I can do that. So again, I would just click delete, click yes to confirm, and they're gone. Now that doesn't remove them from that archive, just to reinforce that one. If I went back to the archive, that record would still be there. I could print out the invoice, see what was on it, etc. So what we're looking at is removing it from the invoices list. So the transactions themselves, once you've updated an invoice, you've posted it to the ledgers or using the update ledgers option, it posts an equivalent transaction. And at that point, the two really aren't linked at that point. So all we're doing is we're removing the invoice record from this list. Now, to save me having to go through and say, right, that one, that one, that one, that one, I want to get rid of however many. Yes, you can do that, nice and simple. A couple of other ways that you can do it as well. But the easiest way to select your records that you want to get rid of is to use the filter option. Now, we do have a recorded webinar on filters, but I really want to take this opportunity because it's a nice, simple option to use in this particular aspect. So we click filter at the top. And when you first go in, it'll just essentially be blank. So in the joint column, I would say where, and I would say, let's say invoice date. Invoice date, it is invoice date. I'm after it. Let's try and select that from the drop down. So invoice date, and I'm going to say is less than or equal to. And in this example, what I want to do, I'm going to use 2021. And I'm going to use the 31st of January 2021. So you can see, if I just drag that out the way, you can see I've got some invoices here. So in 2021, January 2021. So in my case, what I've got left 4 through to 16, they are in January 2021. Obviously, you might have years worth of information that you want to get rid of. So I'm going to put where invoice date is less than or equal to the end of January 2021. And if I click apply, it will, and then close, it then gives me a list of the records that meet that filter that I've just set up. So I can only see the ones at this stage which are dated on or prior to the date I've entered. So I could then just click swap, highlight them, and then click delete. And that's a nice, easy way of selecting them. Then when I remove the filter, all the ones that were hidden will come back on the screen. Now, the other thing I can do before I'll delete them in a moment. But if I remove that filter, just switch it off for the time being. And what I might do is I might approach it where I think, well, actually, I don't want to get rid of records now. I don't want to delete them. All I want to do is I just want to hide them. So you might do a filter the opposite way around. So you might think, well, actually, I'll do where invoice date is greater than or equal to. I'll just leave the date as is. And if I click apply now, what I now see is I only see invoices and credits on my list that are dated on or after the date. So it's a good way of what maybe once an invoice is being posted, I could apply a filter to say, right, well, hide that now. I've posted it. It means I've updated it to the ledgers. I don't need to see that on the list anymore. So really just the outstanding ones that are there at that point. But what we're going to do is we're going to apply the filter the other way. So back to filter, and I'm going to say is just switch it back to is less than or equal to. I'll apply the filter. So only the older ones are now displayed. I'm then going to click swap to highlight them all. Swap reverses the highlight. So if, for instance, I didn't have those two selected, if I click swap, it reverses the highlight selection. So if I just click clear, it'll remove the highlight. Click swap, it'll now highlight everything because there was nothing selected. And now I can ready to delete them. So I click delete, click yes, and that's it done. Now, all I do at that point is I just switch the filter off. So I'll click on the little funnel icon at the top, it'll switch the filter off, and I've now just got the ones that I want remaining on my system. Alison, you mentioned you've got a filter set up where posted flag is equal to yes. So what that should be, you need to be just a little bit careful. Make sure you've got nothing in the search box at the top, and obviously, if you give us an idea what filter you've got set up. So if I do, you mentioned where posted flag. Let's have a quick look, see if I can find it. Posted flag, I'll do is equal to. Now if I set that to yes, apply, you can see all the ones with a yes in the posted column because that's the only line that I've got set up within my filter. So you can see they're all there. If I switch it the other way and set it to where posted flag is equal to no, I'll only see the ones that haven't or have a blank posted status. So do be careful. If you've got any problems with that, probably just get in touch with our support team is the easiest thing to do. Anyway, we'll clear that filter, click close, and we've now got our updated list. What I want to quickly show, because I can see there's a couple of questions come through on this as well. What I'll do is this one here, this A1 Design Services, I'm just going to update that one to the ledgers. So we'll just preview it. It tells me it's updated, so it's invoice number 93 and it's transaction 1243. So that one now says is being posted. And if I go into the customer and into the activity of that customer, and you'll see that that transaction is listed. So 1243, the transaction is there. Now, if I go back to the invoice list, and I've got that invoice 93 selected, and I delete it, it just removes it from the list. That's it gone. If I go back to the customer, have a look at the activity again, you'll see that invoice 93 is still there. So when I selected the invoice and I updated it to the ledgers, essentially it looks at the invoice and says, right, I need to post this information as a transaction. And at that point, the link is essentially, it's cut at that point. So you've got an invoice on the invoice list, you've got an invoice on the activity. If you amend the invoice on the activity via corrections, for instance, it doesn't feed that back to the invoice. Similarly, if you delete the invoice from the activity, it wouldn't affect the invoice list. And that's the same way if we delete it from the invoice list, it doesn't impact the activity. So I hope that's a little bit clearer. Catherine, you were just mentioning, is there any way to clear all module filters in one go? There's not a quick way to do that. You just need to go into the specific module. And the key to seeing if there's a filter applied is this little bit of text at the top. When it says all records, and in brackets it tells me how many I've got, so 32 in my case, it means that I don't have a filter applied. If I apply some sort of filter, whatever that is, let's just choose a, actually I'll do invoice date. Actually, we'll do posted flag. Probably an easier one for me to select. It would help if I was in the right screen, of course. Let's try that within the invoice now. I thought it didn't look right there when I was applying the filter. So if I apply a filter, we'll just base it on what we were looking at earlier, the posted flag. And I'll just say it is equal to yes, apply that. So again, in this instance, it's telling me X of X number of records, and that would indicate I've got a filter applied to my list. To switch that filter off, I just click on the little filter symbol at the top. And when there's no filter applied, it will say all records. So easy enough just to switch off, but there's not an option to just say, right, remove all filters from every single module. It's just a case of going into that module and making sure it says all records at the top. If it doesn't say all records, click your little filter symbol, job done. So as you can see, we can either select invoices individually, highlight them, click delete, nice and simple, or we can select them in bulk just by going through, selecting the ones we want to get rid of, or using that filter to identify the ones that we want to get rid of, then clicking swap to highlight them all, then delete. And then we can switch the filter off afterwards. So makes it nice and easy. Kelly, you're just asking as well, can you apply more than one filter on a set of data? Absolutely, yes. You can add as many lines as you want. If anyone's got any queries about filters, or what I would encourage you to do is watch the recording. So when you get your follow-up email, there will be a link to the webinar recordings, and there was a great one that Jackie ran, I think it was at the time, where we went into filters and using the quick search in a lot more detail, how to build filters, multiple lines, etc. So it's a really good tool as well. So have a good look through that. So you'll get your follow-up email around about an hour after we finish today. So anyway, that's deleting invoices. Next, we're going to go back to the slides, and next I want to pick up on deleting orders. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, sales orders and purchase orders, you will only have this option available to you if you are on the professional level of the software. Now, you're in pretty much the same position. Records need to be deleted manually. You've got the same options available to you. So you can apply a filter, or you can just go through manually selecting it and then clicking the delete option. So once you know how to delete records from invoicing, you can apply that same learning to the order processing areas. Now, two things to be aware of with order processing is that when you delete a sales order, if you've got any stock allocated to that sales order, the allocations are just removed that's associated with that sales order. For purchase orders, if there's any on-order stock, again, that's removed as well for any associated purchase orders that you've removed. Let's just have a quick look at that one then. So back to my screen. And I'm going to first of all go into products, and I'm just going to choose this product here, this very first one I've got listed. If we go into the record, and you can see at the bottom here, I've got an allocated value of 2, and I've got an on order value of 100. Now, you've got these little plus symbols next to these boxes as well, so you can see what orders they actually relate to. So the allocated, if I click on that one, I can see it relates to, in this case, sales order number 35. Sim for on order, it will give me an order number. So in this case, purchase order number 42. Now, if we go into sales orders and as an example, and again, we'd be in the same position where whatever we want to get rid of, we'd highlight or apply a filter, then highlight them all and click delete. So just in case of, again, highlighting them, you've got the delete option at the top. Just click yes to that. That's it done. Again, if there are any orders that are allocated, so in this case, it says allocated full, or might say in part as well. If I delete that order, so I'll just click yes to that, and I go back to the product and service record, you'll see that the allocated, it resets it. So essentially it strips out the effects of that order with regard to the allocation at that point. It resets it essentially. And similar for purchase orders as well. So purchase orders, really no different in that respect. If you've got anything with an on order status in full or part, then if we highlight a particular order with a status like that and delete it, just click yes to the prompts. It essentially removes the effects of its current status. So again, if we go back to products and services, into the relevant record, you can see the on order value is now, it's been recalculated. So in this case, there's nothing left on order, so it's reset it back to 0. Hope that one makes sense as well. So essentially, you're not having to, if you've got a sales order with any allocations, you don't have to unallocate before you delete it. Similar, if you've got any purchase orders with an on order status, you don't have to take it off order before you delete. It will do that for you automatically. So Alison, you're just asking there, can an order be deleted regardless of status? So essentially, yes. Right, let's pop back to the slides. The final area I want to cover with you with regard to deleting records in today's session is deleting quotations. Now, this one's a little bit different in that, well, I say it's a little bit different. It is and it isn't. So records can be deleted, only be deleted from within quotations if a quotation is flagged as being lost. So you can have various statuses associated with a quotation. So if you go into quotations, you'll only be able to delete it if it's flagged as lost. Now, there are quick filters, which you can see on the screenshot as well. I'll show you that one in the demo in a moment as well. However, quotations will also appear on your invoices and credits list or your sales order list, depending on how you've got your system set up. So if you're on the professional level of the software, you can say, right, when I win a quotation, I want it to convert to a sales order, or I want it to convert to an invoice. You get that choice. Whereas the other levels, because you don't have the sales and purchase order module, you won't have that choice. It'll just automatically convert to an invoice when it's flagged as having been won. So you can actually go into the invoices and credits module or the sales order modules, and you can delete quotations in there irrespective of their status. Let's just have a quick look at what we're talking about there, because it's the only thing that may catch people out. So let me just quickly show you that one. So if we go into quotations, if I highlight a one that doesn't have a status of lost and I try to delete it, it'll tell me only quotes with a status of lost can be deleted. So okay, and that one remains there. If I highlight a one that is flagged as being lost, try to delete it, click yes, it will then get rid of it because it meets the criteria at that point. But we got number, just as an example, we've got 91. We'll pick on that one. If we pop into invoices and credits, and we'll see number 91 is on the list there. And we could then just go in and delete it at that point. So there's another way around sort of getting it or removing those quotes if needed. So rather than you manually go through and flag them all as being lost, you could essentially go into invoicing or sales orders, depending how you've got that set up, and do that. The quick filter that I was on about is this option here. So within quotations, you get this option of saying, right, only display quotations that are flagged as won or lost or open or expired. So if I wanted to, rather than try and set up the filter myself, I can just say, right, give me a list of all of the quotations that are flagged as having been lost. It quickly applies that filter. I can then click swap, click delete. It'll get rid of them all for me. And then when I switch back to all invoice quotations in this case, it resets my list and gives me a list of what's left. So that's nice and easy. Right, okay, hopefully that one makes sense as well. It's a bit more unusual, that one, in that if you do try to delete it, it's got to have a certain status. Right, let's pop back to the slides. And the final area I wanted to quickly demo to you today is, and tell you a little bit about, is compressing your data. Now, you only need to compress your data if you've deleted records. You don't need to compress it otherwise. So what we normally recommend if you do delete records from certain areas is that you go and compress your data to reduce the size of your data files. It's a nice, simple task. Just need to make sure you've got a backup prior to running the routine. To access it, you're just going to go into File, Maintenance, and then Compress Data. It'll bring up the window similar to what we got on the screen there. I'll show you this one live in the software in a moment. You'll remove the tick from Compress All Data Files, and then you will select the areas that you want to compress. It's not going to necessarily do any harm by compressing all data files, but if you haven't removed records from certain areas, there's no point in compressing it. All you're doing is, it means that the process is going to take longer. It is very quick on mine, because mine is a tiny, tiny data set. But, you know, the more data you have, if you're running across a network, etc., the longer this is going to take. So let's quickly have a look at compressing. As I say, it's a very easy task. So I'm just going to go into File, into Maintenance, and then Compress Data. So initially, it will tick the box at the top, compress all data files. So take the tick out of that, and then select the ledgers where you've removed records from. So in this case, invoices, sales orders, and purchase orders. I click compress. It's virtually instant on mine. Yours, if you've got loads of records in these areas, just let it run through. It'll come back to this once it's complete. Just click OK. You can then click close out of file maintenance, job done. So a nice simple option, that one. Again, you'll find loads of information about compressing your data within the Help Center. But again, you only need to do that if you are deleting records. Otherwise, there's going to be no benefit to you otherwise. Cheryl, you mentioned there just about your sales orders go back to 2020. Again, it's I think going back to the recommendations wise as well, is that the recommendation for invoices is 50,000 records. So have you got that many? Do you need to do anything then to maybe consider then removing records or not? Right, let's pop back to the slides. It does bring us to the end of the demos of what we'd planned to cover. So I hope it's given you a little bit of an insight, and hopefully that filter, it's not just used necessarily for when it comes to deleting records. You might do it as a way of identifying records that you want to include on a report. For things like maybe in the customers area, for instance, you might want customers that are located in a certain area. So you'll go and say, right, I want all customers where the last line of the address is this. So maybe based on the county, or where the postcode begins with, I don't know, something like NA1, for instance. So again, if you want to find out more about filters and how you can use those and benefit from them within your software, watch the webinar recording. Just want to quickly mention a little bit about being a Sage member though. So this is something you may have come across over the last few months, because it's something we have been talking about. And Sage membership, it's not just about having Sage software. There's a lot more to it than that these days. If you have downloaded the handouts, you'll have all this information available, and you'll find loads of information online as well. And there's some links included on the handout as well. So it gives you access to learning opportunities. So Sage Sage University, where we host all of our online learning courses. If you want to learn more about your software, do check that out. It gives you access to our member masterclasses, which are videos, a few of which you can see on the slide there, which is about general business advice. Obviously, we go for themes, so things like it might be looking after your employees or boosting productivity within your company. So more business orientated webinars than software itself. So loads of options available to you. Again, if you've downloaded the handout, the links will work for you. So loads of information there for you as well. For some of the upcoming webinars, I have mentioned there about clearing old records, because this is part 3 in that series of webinars we were running. So you may have come across clearing old records as part of maybe the year-end webinar, where we mention about the optional task. Remember, removing records, it's optional. It's quite common, you may have heard about clearing your audit trail, so removing older transactions, but clearing your older records, so your stock records, your customers, supplies, nominal codes, invoices, orders, quotations, might be not really be something maybe you've really considered. So hopefully, if you want more information on them, links to the recordings, because we've already run these sessions now. It was the last one today, but links to the recordings, including to today's recording, will be included in your follow-up email. So watch out for that one. Should get that within around about an hour's time. Some of the upcoming live sessions we've got, well, we're concentrating on emailing over the next, throughout February. So emailing statements, emailing invoices, if you want to find out more about that. Even just to come along and make sure you're doing almost like best practice, then come along and you'll see that in action. VAT return we're covering, year end as normal, bank reconciliation, bank feeds and rules. So again, all popular areas. So repeating some of these sessions that we've run previously. Watch out for your follow-up email, and it will include the links that you need to get yourself registered. Right, now I'm going to try and pick up some of the questions as well in a moment. I can see obviously some of them are quite lengthy, some of the questions, so maybe I'll try and get involved and run an additional demo here and there if I can. But for those of you that are thinking about leaving, many thanks for coming along. I hope you have enjoyed it and it's made things a little bit clearer for you. There will be a little survey pop up as you exit today's session, so if you can take a minute just to pop some feedback on there, it'd be great. Any ideas, thoughts you want to share with us, how we could improve the webinar, topics you'd like to see covered, what you liked, didn't like, anything and everything, just pop it on there. Follow-up email should be with you in around about an hour, and that will give you access to today's recording and previous ones as well. And it will also give you a link so you can register for other webinars as well. So if you are leaving, many thanks. Hope you've enjoyed it. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you again. If anyone's hanging around, we'll maybe try and pick up some of those questions that are outstanding as well. So I've got a question from Margaret there, and I can see Abby's picking that up at the moment. Margaret's just asking about needs to amend an invoice. So the invoice has already been posted. Now, what I mentioned earlier, let me see if I can demonstrate this as well. So I'll go back to my screen. So if you've got an invoice And this one isn't posted yet, but we'll quickly update it. Veering off track a little bit at this point, but we'll quickly update it so that it appears on the customer's account. Now at this stage, that invoice has been updated, and if we go into customers, have a look at the activity, we'll see that invoice 89 is on there. Now they are sort of linked. You've got a hot link, but that's it. If you make any amends to this invoice at this stage, then it doesn't feed it back to the invoice on the invoice list, and vice versa, I might add as well. So if you needed to remove it all, then it would just be a case of deleting the transaction. So going into the customer activity, deleting the transaction, or alternatively, the alternative would be to raise a full invoice against that invoice and then re-raise an invoice for the required information. But if you're quite happy just to scrap it all, you would delete the transaction from the customer activity, and then you would also go into invoices and credits and you would delete it from here as well. So again, highlighting it, clicking delete at the top, and it will remove it from the list. The only thing, Margaret, obviously when you go to create a new invoice, it will give you the next available invoice number. It won't go back to use the original. So there's a few other things to consider if you want to use an old number. It's probably the best option at that point to get in touch with our support team, and they would just guide you through that process as and when you're ready. I think that was the only outstanding question we had at that point. Right, I think we're ready just to wrap up the webinar in that case. So once again, many thanks for coming along. I hope you have enjoyed it and found it useful. If you do think of anything afterwards, obviously there's loads of information in the help center. The email will be with you in a few minutes, about an hour's time as well. And of course, our support team is on hand as well if you've got more specific queries and you're still not sure. So once again, many thanks for coming along. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you again.